Hello, this is D, and I'm back with another video where we got a pretty big update today regarding Microsoft's ABK merger. Now, they presented their appeal to the Competition Appeal Tribunal of the UK. Basically, we've been calling them CAT. And Florian Mueller, he shared his observations from the trial. Now, this was a live stream, so many of you guys did see it. I caught parts of it. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to watch all of it. I had too many things to do. But I will say from my observations of what happened in court, it did appear that Microsoft lawyers were well equipped, like they were well prepared for this case, and the CMA lawyers not so much. Justice Smith was presiding over the hearings, and I gotta say it was a doozy. Now, the goal would be to have the hearing in July, and the CMA tried to stall it. Now, Justice Smith kind of went through all the details and all the submissions, and he basically said that this trial should go on in July and that it shouldn't be delayed. Now, the CMA tried to say that they weren't prepared, that they needed more time, and they wanted it to go all the way to the fall. And I know for a fact that this goes against what the UK government wants. The UK government gave the CMA more powers. Now, a lot of people are under the misconception that they gave them more powers to block things. They gave them more powers so that they have more freedom, more leeway, and less red tape so they can approve more deals and get the economy rolling in the UK. It's not to block more mergers. Now, their block, it just didn't make any sense. They said they weren't prepared, they needed more time, and they wanted it to go all the way to the fall. Now, the CMA knows exactly what they're doing. Microsoft has a close date on this. Going to the fall would definitely pass their close date, and maybe they would have to forego on the deal and pay Activision $3 billion. Fortunately for Microsoft, the judge didn't see things this way. He wants to get this done as soon as possible, and he scheduled a July 24th hearing. So basically, in July, Microsoft is going to go back to the courts, and they're going to argue their cases in front of CAT. Now, they're also going to fall around the same time with the FTC in court. So by the end of the summer, we're going to know whether this deal is going to go through or not. Now, we found some very interesting things from yesterday's proceedings. Basically, Microsoft can close the deals now. Not in the UK, obviously, but in other regions. So I'm just going to go through what Florian Mueller posted. I'm going to put his Twitter handle in the description down below so you can check it all out for yourself, because there is a lot going on. So we're just going to read through it right now. Justice Smith wants to discuss how to make job of the near-term hearing more manageable. Now, talking about his perspectives of the roadblocks, questions of expert evidence. Not now, but at some point, seems that the judge is potentially derailing questions. Justice Smith says intervention could slow things down. Interventions would be possible on both sides, and there are issues of disclosure or confidential information. Microsoft's counsel went on to say if this does not move forward quickly, the risk of the merger not happening. The CMA argued that the other regulators haven't approved either. Microsoft's counsel said the CMA is highly selective. Microsoft's counsel says the CMA is an outlier here. It risks derailing the whole deal. Prospects of the deal being disrupted increase over time as the delay continues. Microsoft says the CMA refers to 3 jurisdictions, Canada and New Zealand. Approval not granted, but the CMA doesn't know the outcome. Under Canadian law, the deal would be already closed. While there is an investigation pending, the overtime and therefore the investigation is no obstacle to closing the deal. In the US, the waiting period has also expired. The US law would not make it illegal to close the deal now. The FTC would have to seek an injunction, and that hasn't happened, Microsoft's counsel said. Now, I've discussed that before, that Microsoft could say to the FTC that we're going to close this deal, and at that time they would have to file for a preliminary injunction. Now, the courts could say there's no evidence to give you this injunction, and they could close the deal, or the courts could say, all right, let's hear this in court, and they would delay the deal, and they would basically block it until it's heard in court. So that is an option, but it's not stopping Microsoft from attempting to close the deal. Now, Canada's deadline to object the deal is over. So if they do object the deal, I guess they could go to court, but they couldn't stop the deal. It would basically be like fines, maybe something afterwards if the deal went through. I'm not quite sure on that, but I know they can't stop the deal anymore because their deadline has passed. And let's just be honest, Canada most likely is going to pass the deal anyways. Now, Florian Mueller with his coverage goes on to say that Microsoft is getting clearance in other jurisdictions. It's a worldwide merger. Microsoft wants to close as quickly as possible. The CMA decision is an outlier. It creates creates uncertainty, therefore important to remove the uncertainty. Justice Smith now talking in a hypothetical about possibility of Microsoft's appeal succeeding and asked whether it would influence the FTC's position. Microsoft's counsel said they can't say that, mentions evidentiary hearing in August, but the FTC process is rather different from the UK. Now, I've discussed earlier that, or in other videos, that the FTC, they have to prove that this would harm gamers, that it would harm the market. And we know their case is weak, and they're not going to be able to prove it because this is a market that doesn't exist. They're kind of basing it a little bit on the cloud market, which doesn't exist. It's like basically 1 to 5% of gamers right now. They're also putting it up against Sony and exclusives and all that stuff. And I think it's all nonsense, basically, because Sony's upset that Call of Duty is possibly going to be owned by Microsoft. Yet Microsoft said they're not going to remove it from their platforms. But of course, Sony's not going to have those nice, cushy first-party deals anymore with Call of Duty. And they make a lot of money off of that. So they're raising a lot of hell about that. And I find it really peculiar that the US regulators are actually going against Microsoft, an American company, in favor of Sony. Make it make sense. Now, Justice Smith summarized Microsoft's positions as closing out uncertainty in the jurisdiction is a benefit, and Microsoft's lawyer replied, an enormous benefit. In relation to a tiny part of the gaming industry, CMA made a remarkable, not as compliant as he clarifies, decision to block the worldwide deal. Microsoft says the time limit for the takeover offer, a public offer, encourages the importance of dealing with this matter as soon as possible. Microsoft recognized the date as referred to by the ABK would be before July 24th. Now, this is a huge read, and I'll be honest with you guys, I'm kind of just going to scroll through it here so you guys can see it for yourself, and maybe we'll pick out a few parts of it. But I got to say, it was a good showing for Microsoft yesterday. Their lawyers were well equipped for this case. You could tell they were prepared. And the CMA, they just look like a fish out of water. And it's going to be very telling going forward. Now, these are preliminary proceedings, so don't take everything so much. They're going to rebound from this. They're going to prepare themselves for the case. I don't think they're going to be so dreadful in the case. However, their position is very weak. It's extremely weak. And the fact that they tried to stall this into the fall is really telling. We also found out that they only took 4 weeks out of, I believe, 32 to 40 weeks of their investigation on the cloud. So only a month they spent on the cloud, yet the cloud is the number one reason to block this deal. It seems like they have no grounds. Their grounds seem very weak, because the EU clarified that no, we don't see the cloud gaming as a different market. They clarified that they believe that the CMA's numbers were skewed, that they had, Game Pass members in there, they had Xbox Live members in there, and this was not reflective of the real numbers. We see that they're trying to stall stuff here. When the Prime Minister, he wants things to be done quickly. He put new rules into effect to cut the red tape. Yet you have the CMA here trying to stall this case until the fall, knowing full well that Microsoft has a deadline on closing the deal. If they don't close the deal by, the deadline's about to pass, then they would have to pay $3 billion. Now, because of the court case, Activision, both parties have agreed to waive the due date on this deal. So they're going to extend it. Contrary to what a lot of people say, like I see this one person on Twitter here, the same person that we bring up here on the channel, saying that Marcus Smith just gave Activision their $3 billion. Let's see if Activision intends to sell. Amazing drama. Like, I don't understand what you're talking about here. Did you watch the proceedings? Because if you watched the proceedings, you would have known that they agreed to move the date. Some of these guys are just hell-bent on this deal not going through. Now, a lot of people are saying, okay, what happens? What's next? Microsoft wins their appeal. It just goes back to the CMA, and they can just rule the same way. No, because CAT basically would correct their errors. So if Cat says, listen, the numbers that you came to in your conclusion to block this deal, they're not valid. Those Game Pass members, those Xbox Live members, they are not a part of cloud gaming. You can't put them all together. So your numbers are skewed, so you're going to have to throw that out. What other reasons can the CMA come up with to block Microsoft? All their other reasons they threw out. They threw out, the competition against Sony and the exclusive stuff. They went with cloud gaming as their reason for blocking this merger. Now, if Cat rules that they came to this unreasonably and that it was flawed, they can't go back and say, oh, but they're going to compete against Sony with their exclusives. They can't bring the other arguments out because they threw them out already. And I believe at that point in time, they're going to have to pass this deal because they're not going to have any grounds not to pass this deal. What will happen with the FTC when they see this happening, if this happens? Microsoft at that point is going to say, we're going to close this deal. We intend to close this deal in the US. The FTC at that point will have to decide if they're going to go to court to get a preliminary injunction to block this deal, or if they're just going to say it's not worth it and we'll just let it go through. A lot of people are under the impression that the FTC is hell-bent, and I might agree with you because they've gone to courts with so many cases that they had even lesser grounds that they lost. And I really do believe that the FTC will lose their case because their grounds are weak, and in the US, you have to prove it in court. It's a completely different way of litigation than the UK. Now, let's go back to what Florian Mueller was saying here. He goes on to say that Justice Smith, on a judgment that follows any hearing, he wants to land down a judgment during the course of the summer and not just in October. The reasons we need to try for those dates is late July, the start of the hearing. He now talks about Roblox, asking Microsoft a question now about expert reports. The CMA lawyer, Williams, now wanted to talk again before Microsoft would be asked that question. Justice Smith wants everyone to leave the courtroom today with a fortnight period in mind, but how to concentrate within that period is another question. Justice Smith wants to focus on questions of fairness. Justice Smith would like to go over the practical roadblocks he's identified with Microsoft, but CMA still wants to argue here before that even happens. The CMA coming up with excuses and excuses and excuses, such as they can't instruct suitable counsel for this matter in time. Justice Smith is not impressed with the counsel-related argument, and basically he kind of ruled against them. He said that we're going to do this in July. We're not going to do this in September, October, November. We need to get this deal done or this court case done as soon as possible. So basically, they lost their arguments yesterday in court, the CMA. Like I said, it's nothing really to put too much weight on because the hearing is what really matters, not the pretrial stuff. It doesn't matter as much. Yes, it shows us how competent Microsoft lawyers are and how possibly incompetent the CMA lawyers are. But at the end of the day, this has to be heard in front of the judge, and they will be making the final decision. Now, I've said so much on this case. You guys know most of the details. I do expect Canada to approve this deal. I think the only outliers will be the CMA and the FTC, and I do believe in the end, they're going to lose. Microsoft is serious about putting this deal through. They got the top lawyers, and I do believe the evidence is on their side. Now, anything can go in this case. There's been a lot of ups and downs. I am happy that the end is kind of in sight. We can see the end of the tunnel, and it looks like it's going to be sometime in August. I'm disappointed that the CMA only took 4 weeks out of the 32 weeks that they had to focus on the cloud, yet this is the reason to block the deal. They clearly didn't spend enough time on the cloud, because if they did, they would have came to a different conclusion. They would have seen that their numbers are skewed, as the EU pointed out to the CMA, but the CMA is kind of in the headspace now that they're right, when I believe that they're being wrong and strong. And I do believe that after this court case, we're going to find out that their findings were not rational. And I do believe when it gets thrown back to them after the appeal, that they're going to have to rule in favor of Microsoft because they're not going to have any valid reasons to block this deal. Anyways, I wonder what you guys think about all of this. I know some of you guys just want this to be over. I know some of you guys are just excited for Microsoft, thinking that this deal is going to go through. And I'm very confident, and I got to say, I'm a lot more positive now about this deal going through. But anything could still happen. We have to wait until the final ruling. I will say, once again, it does look good for Microsoft, and they have great representation in the UK. We have to see what happens with the US courts, with the FTC. So we're still going to have to wait a little bit more. We're going to have more information in July as this case starts. I believe there's like some type of pre-trial or some other proceedings for the lawyers in June. I think it's the 12th of June. I do understand that there could be a deal struck in between this time, but seeing how headstrong the CMA is, I just don't see that happening. This is just going to play out in court. I know it's wishful thinking for many out there, hoping that they're going to come to some type of compromise. I just don't think they're there anymore. I think that time has passed. I think the CMA, they want to win, and they think that they have grounds to block this deal, when most of us know that that is not the case. Anyways, I want to know what you guys think about all of this, so let me know in the comment section down below. Like I usually say, please like, share, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys on the next one.
Well, fundamentally, we have an acquisition that we think will bring more competition and more access to games for consumers on a global basis. And that's why we now have approval from almost 40 countries with more than 2 billion people for this to proceed. And there are some regulators that have expressed concerns, and we get it. We want to address those concerns. I'm encouraged that we were able to have a solution for the European Union that lets the acquisition go forward, again with guardrails, to ensure that everyone gets access to these games for all kinds of cloud game streaming services, and not Microsoft alone. Now, obviously, we have not yet succeeded in addressing the concern of every regulator, but look, at the end of the day, you have to decide: do you want to find a solution to every problem, or do you want to find a problem with every solution? We are focused on finding a solution to every problem, because I believe solutions are there. And you can count on us to want to be creative, to want to be constructive, and frankly, to be determined to keep working to find the solutions that will get the good out of this and then make those benefits available to everybody.
Watch this space. Brad, you couldn't be clearer on that. Great to chat to you, sir, as always. It's always exciting times, but I think this moment perhaps more so than ever. We'll speak again soon. Thank you so much. And
as always, thank you, Julia.
Thank you.